One of the best features of the Newseum are today's front pages. They've got up to 80 up front, usually close to 4 dozen or so. And they give, well, windows into the world. There's papers from Canada, there's papers from South Africa, New Zealand, Denmark, Chile, Bangladesh, and then here in the United States. And you can see how the different papers prioritize different stories. The size of the headlines, the presence of the headlines, the different stories themselves. The one that is, I think, still cascading is the former former campaign chairman of President Donald J. Trump was sentenced to 47 months, which is significantly less than the sentencing guidelines. And that is getting play in the different national papers. At the state and local level, headline still shows up, but you see other concerns from development, to earmarks, different bills, to local sports. You see the Seattle Times prioritized it differently. The Virginia Pilot, a little bit different, right? That's below the fold here. Burlington Free Press is more of a tabloid look. Here you've got e-scooters in Utah. Down in Texas, that headline isn't there at all. But you've got something else focused on the border. Tennessee, focus on bills. Argus Leader in South Dakota, talking about plastic pollution, local issues. South Carolina, Manafort news is played up differently. In Rhode Island, you've got Bill, you've got Alex Trebek's illness, the Manafort sentence. The Inquirer puts it up there, and along with veterans issue and important transparency issue about body cameras. Oregon, the Oregonian highlights the impact of not vaccinating the young boys. Almost $1 million in medical bills, but they were able to save the boy who got cut and had terrible symptoms. Stories from the Oklahoman, Cleveland plane dealer, important local news there about Sam Miller passing away, Sherrod Brown not running for president. You've got the Manafort news all the way here in the nation and the world. North Dakota, focusing on Fargo and weather issues. Charlotte, don't see that news anywhere, but you do have important coverage of what borrowing could it do in terms of people's taxes. New York Times Union, different stories here, local interest. Here is an important bit about felony wire charge, which is part of a local government official. And then here we've got more about the ongoing exhibition, about to open up exhibition from Stonewall, and freedom of expression, which is part of the Newseum's remit. Celebrating student journalists here, important part of the profession, often don't have, as they say, the same protections, issues of censorship and budget cuts. Only 14 states protect press freedom rights of student journalists. That is something that could see more improvement. I'm headed to this conference shortly upstairs, but we'll finish the tour here. We've got Family Pride Weekend coming up this weekend, and then here's more news from the Stonewall exhibit to come, and then Minnesota, looking at different news here, controversy around Omar. We've got the Detroit Free Press looking at celebration for Franklin, and again, local news, important. The Boston Globe does notice Manafort, interestingly, facing possible 24 years in jail. Manafort gets less than 4. That's a different headline and an important one. We've got the Baltimore Sun, local news, medically assisted suicide bill, Hopkins, rights groups, Manafort's all the way down here. Portland Press Herald, we've got efforts to amend the Constitution, regulatory rule, sports, and then here's the Manafort news. Louisiana, that news isn't there anywhere in this one, but you've got a terrible story about children being killed. And here in Kentucky, got school teachers organizing, something about email, love of fish fries. We've got something in Wichita, all the way there is Manafort. We've got local news, and again, coverage of a bill, in this case, legislation that would affect people. We've got impact of a vote on the Methodist Church in terms of the ban on gay clergy, coverage of immigrants, and also a bill there. Again, coverage of what the government is doing. Almost like there's a theme here through these things. In Indianapolis, you got syndicated coverage out of USA Today Network. So they're, Indianapolis Star, part of that network. Don't see anything about Manafort in this one. Here's the Tribune, covering their ongoing challenges with violence. You've got the runoff, covering the mayoral race there. And here in Idaho, more again on a bill. There's the Manafort news. Someone finding a painting. In Hawaii, top news here, where you've got the prosecutor stepping aside after he's a target of federal investigation to government corruption. Again, there's a theme. And infrastructure, so covering the status of what's happening in the state. Down in Atlanta, you've got coverage of what's happening in the State House, and you've got another bill there, and coverage of corruption there, and one man trying to put out information. You don't see anything about Manafort here. Miami Herald puts it top. They don't put the context of him maybe getting 19 to 24, but they do put him at the top above the fold. They've got accountability for a police officer, and they've got coverage of what's happening in Haiti. The Washington Post puts the Manafort news up top and says the context right there, well below sentencing guidelines. A story about Congress, status of what's happening with ISIS, and coverage of Biden, who may well get into the race. It seems to be how that's going to happen to the vice president. You've got Delaware. You've got coverage of a marijuana dispensary, a wedding cake hotel, Facebook, customer service, Connecticut, Hartford. They've got the Manafort news. They've got coverage again of a local bill. They've got arson charges for a terrible fire, highway construction, cover of the homeless. Here in the Denver Post, you've got the former governor, Hickenlooper, who's running for president. You've got coverage of the local weather. Here's Manafort news and a new bill. LA Times, covering abuse questions. They've got coverage of what's happening in Warner Media, important power center. There's Manafort, following up on the terrible wildfires. What's happening to the Islamic State. Arkansas has a lot going on its front page. They've put Manafort up top. You've got coverage of what's happening with the police. And look, here's a video that's released, again, showing the importance of transparency and access to those kinds of videos. This is dashboard cam, the subject of considerable debate. And here's a bill, again, coverage of what's happening in local governments. Arizona Republic is covering what's happening in the courts, what's going on at the university. Here's the Manafort news. Anchorage Daily News all the way up in Alaska. They're looking at the Iditarod, the wonderful mushing race. They've got coverage of what's happening to the budget, the Manafort news. And then finally in Alabama, looking at their professional soccer team, etc.
Birmingham Legion. They are the new team in Birmingham, and they have the best vice president ever, Doug Hicks.
Kevin Goldberg, stepping in to talk about the headlines. And that's the news.